Hello and welcome to a Firstpost POV. The Indian capital, New Delhi, is no stranger to welcoming diplomatic guests, whether that's presidents or prime ministers or any top diplomats. But today, the city is welcoming a bit of a strange diplomatic guest because it's the foreign minister of a regime that is not officially recognized by India. I'm talking about Mr. Amir Khan Muttaqi, who's the Taliban's foreign minister in Kabul. This is the first time a Taliban minister or any official indeed from the Taliban is visiting India after the fall of Kabul in 2021. The question is, does this mean India is quietly moving towards recognizing the regime in Kabul? And if not, what explains this warming with Afghanistan? Let me put some of these questions to my guest, Mr. Tilak Devasher, who's an author and also former member of the National Security Advisory Board. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to us on Firstpost.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Let's address that first question. On paper, of course, India does not recognize the regime in Kabul. But de facto, for all practical purposes after this visit, would you say that we have accepted that the regime in Kabul is now run by the Taliban?
In diplomatic parlance, that's a very loaded statement. There is a formal process of recognition, which India hasn't done. I don't think India is going to do. India will not break the international consensus, which is there on the recognition of the Taliban. But short of that, we have our own national interest, as do so many other countries in Afghanistan. And they are dealing with it in a practical manner. So I think this visit also shows that we are pushing the practical consideration of our relationship and our national interest short of formal recognition.
I'm sure a lot of people in India will be confused by why we are hosting a foreign minister that we don't recognize. So could you explain the logic behind inviting Mr. Muttaqi to India right now and why New Delhi has decided to host him at this point?
Let me tell you, there's an old saying in India, he who would want to be emperor of Delhi must first control Kabul. You see, all the invasions of India, except for the British, all came via Afghanistan. Therefore, to secure Delhi, it was always important that you are able to have some sort of a control over Kabul. Today, of course, there is no question of control, but you want to ensure that the ungoverned or open spaces in Afghanistan are not misused by terrorist organizations, especially by Pakistan, putting in camps of the Lashkar-e-Toiba or the Jaish-e-Mohammed over there. Therefore, Kabul and Afghanistan continues to be of great importance as far as India is concerned. So yes, recognition is only one aspect of it. But as I mentioned, we have our own national interest and we have to ensure that in the protection of those national interests, we have some sort of a relationship with Afghanistan that they ensure that our national interest, which is not to allow any space to Pakistan-based terrorists to take shelter in Afghanistan.
Let's dive a bit into those specifics as well, because the first Taliban regime in the late 1990s had no sort of relations with India. India was backing the other side, so to say, in Afghanistan. So what has changed from the late 1990s under Taliban 1.0 and this new Taliban regime that came to power in 2021 that India has decided it's time to engage with them, if not recognize them? What has changed from then to now?
Okay, so that's a good question. You see, when the Taliban 1.0, only 3 countries recognize them: Pakistan, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And their foreign interaction was limited to these 3 countries. But in the 20 years that they've been out of power, they have developed extensive diplomatic contacts. They are talking to so many countries in the world, whether it's Russia, whether it is China, whether it is Norway, all kinds of countries they are in touch with. And Pakistan is not the only interlocutor for them. Second, Pakistan had thought that once the Taliban came back into power in Kabul, their national interest or their security concerns would be taken care of. But that hasn't happened. Within 6 months of coming back into power in August 2021, the relationship between Pakistan and Taliban have really gone southwards. So today, India has an opportunity which it did not have in Taliban 1.0, because that time the Taliban were totally monopolized by Pakistan. Today, the gap between Taliban and Pakistan is so much that it allows India space to talk to Taliban, to protect its own national interests. Similarly, from the Taliban side, they want India to come back and restart the projects that India was doing. As you're aware, India had done almost 3 billion worth of projects and developmental assistance to the Islamic Republic earlier, President Ghani and President Karzai's government. So the Taliban wants you to come back and do that. At one time, they'd even offered to send Afghan army personnel back to India for training. So the Taliban also perceive an advantage in dealing with India and not having their relationship hostage only to Pakistan. So given this mutuality of interest between India and the Taliban, there is a natural common meeting ground. And that's why, as opposed to Taliban 1.0, in Taliban 2.0, we are having a greater interaction with the Taliban.
Would you then say that the deteriorating ties between Kabul and Islamabad are the primary driver of this engagement between India and Taliban? And if so, does it not run the risk that if they manage to fix their relations, this bet from New Delhi could backfire?
No, but it's not only because of the deteriorating relations between Pakistan and Taliban. There is a direct bilateral relationship that we have managed to establish, irrespective of what happens to the Taliban relationship with Pakistan. The Taliban deteriorating relationship with Pakistan allows you additional space. But the opportunity was already there. Take the case of development assistance. I think India, for example, has given so much of, when the food requirement, 50,000 tons of wheat, I don't know how many tons of medicines. When there was an earthquake, we were the first responders and sent a large amount of relief equipment. Then this whole Chabahar port. As you know, Afghanistan is a landlocked country and it needs Karachi to trade with the outside world. And every now and then, Pakistan squeezes Afghanistan by closing down Karachi port for them. So India was developing Chabahar with Iran, which allows access into Afghanistan. Now that is something which is a very major development as far as Afghanistan is concerned, because it will make sure that they are no longer hostage to Pakistan. So it is not only the deteriorating relations which has allowed us the opportunity, there is a mutuality of interest and there is a strong bilateral content to the relationship.
Right. Now, there is some weight of history to this relationship as well. Like we mentioned, there is some bad blood between the Taliban, the first Taliban regime, and India. So do you think the establishment in India will be able to build some trust with the officials in Kabul? We've seen a host of engagement in the last couple of years with the foreign secretary, with experts at the MEA going to Kabul, with a technical team opening the embassy, reopening the embassy in Kabul. Do you think there is enough trust there between the officials of Kabul and New Delhi to build on these engagements?
You see, trust has to be built. It doesn't grow on a tree that, it's suddenly one fine day you find that there is trust. So trust has to grow, and trust will go through engagement, through trade, and develop over a period of time. So I think this is what is happening now. Earlier when the foreign secretary visited and met the foreign minister in Dubai, then our EAM had a conversation in May or June, and now first face-to-face political meeting that we are having. So trust gets built when you have exchange of visits, exchange of views, and development activities and trade activities. So it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, but certainly I think the trajectory is correct.
Right. Let's talk about some wish lists now. The Taliban officials are here for 8 days, which is a pretty long visit. What do you think Foreign Minister Muttaqi will be looking to take away from this trip to New Delhi? Is he looking for some sort of legitimacy, some symbolism, something he can take back to the world community and say, look, India is hosting me?
That's one, of course. The very fact that he's here in itself is a huge message. If you look at Pakistan TV channels and vloggers, they are really stunned. They feel they've been, bowled a googly and they really don't know how to react. So it's a message back home to the people. I think the wish list that he will come with, first of all, I think is going to be development assistance. I think they want to send and increase the quantum of trade, selling out dry fruits, opening transport corridors. Chabahar would be a big item for discussion, I'm sure, especially after the US has withdrawn the Iran waiver, which had allowed us to work on Chabahar. That is something that will be discussed. I'm sure the Taliban will also talk about expanding their embassy in Delhi and the consulates in Hyderabad and Mumbai to allow them to post more diplomats. They will also talk about more visas, that India is to issue more visas to allow more students to come and study over here. So I think the list is going to go on. It will be a pretty comprehensive thing. And also, I'm sure the foreign minister will brief our side on Bagram. What is the US president's desire to get Bagram and what are they doing about it?
And what about the other side? When Minister Jaishankar sits down with Muttaqi, what will he be hoping to hear from the Taliban side? Will his focus be on counter-terrorism? Will his focus be on Pakistan? What will he talk about?
I think the focus is going to be on our national interest, which is to ensure that terrorist groups like Lashkar, like Jaish, which I mentioned, Al Qaeda, ISKP, don't get shelter and sanctuary in ungoverned spaces in Afghanistan, and they don't make a beeline as far as India is concerned. And so, some sort of guarantees from the Taliban is what our side is going to be looking for primarily. And then also in terms of trade, in terms of corridor, like if this Chabahar thing had continued, that was an excellent corridor, from Mumbai to Chabahar into Afghanistan, into Central Asia, and who knows, into Europe. So how do you, what do you do with that, the trade corridor? How will the two countries now react after the US has pulled out the Iran waiver for Chabahar? So I think these are the issues that will be on the table from our side. But I think security is going to be a major concern.
Right. Now, you've explained the strategic calculations behind this move. India is doing this mainly to secure its own national interests. It's not some love for the Taliban. But looking at it from the outside, the natural doubt that a lot of people will have is that this is not a regime worth engaging with. I mean, they say they've changed from the last time, but the fact is they continue to erase women from their society. Minorities continue to complain about problems. So how does India square off these allegations of engaging with a problematic regime and at the same time looking after its national security interests? Is there any way we can leverage our ties essentially to nudge the Taliban towards making concessions on human rights?
I'm sure over a period of time, once there's trust, you can leverage the kind of position that you have, especially where treatment of women is concerned. As a democratic country, I think all of us feel very upset at the way the women are being treated. But this can happen only if there's trust. You can't take a hammer and bang down the Taliban. And look, let's face it, the Taliban are in complete and full control in Afghanistan, right? So practically, if you want to have a relationship with the government in Afghanistan, you have to deal with the Taliban. There is nobody else on the horizon. Yes, there are some opposition groups, but not of any substantive standing that can shake up the Taliban. Today, there's nobody to challenge the Taliban. So you have to get on with your national interest, and not saying that you bury the question of human rights, especially the treatment of women, but only when you engage with them. You see, the thing to know, and I'm sure at some stage this will be taken up with the Taliban, that there are 53 other Muslim countries. None of them has the treatment of women that the Taliban have. So are they wrong and are the Taliban right? Or is the Taliban wrong and they are right? So this side of a discussion will take place when you develop trust. And they will explain their position. Maybe they can talk, or some of our scholars can talk to them. And I noticed from his program that he's also going to go to Deoband to talk to the Afghan students. And as you know, Deoband has huge significance for the Taliban because that is their alma mater. So, this comes question of trust. It's not that India is compromising on human rights or women's rights or following, in their national interest. But to develop your national interest, you also need to build trust with the Taliban regime so that you can then leverage that trust and try and modify their behavior.
But do you fear that there is also a risk of normalizing the current status quo where countries engage with the Taliban, they use them for their national security goals, but then the rest of it is just forgotten? I ask because every UN Assembly meeting, we hear about these statements calling for improvement, but very little changes on the ground. But yet more and more countries continue to engage with the Taliban. Do you fear that there's a sort of normalization of this status quo that's happening?
No, I don't think so. I think all countries that are engaging with the Taliban are acutely aware of the human rights record and treatment of women. That is getting increasingly worse rather than improving. But I think only when you engage with the Taliban and the Taliban also feel that they have a stake in that engagement. It's not only recognition, it's not only symbolism, but that they have a real stake in strengthening that relationship, and they know that something about their regime bothers you or bothers the world, is change possible. You see, you must realize that the way the Taliban have come up, they've come from the madrasas, from the seminaries, cut off from the rest of the world. So for them to keep their flock together, they have to adopt extreme positions. But gradually, if you can modify and leverage over a period of time, who knows?
Right. Finally, let me just ask you, what could be the next step? Do you foresee perhaps a political visit from India to Kabul in the near future? Maybe a minister traveling to meet the Taliban there?
I think it is possible. Certainly it's possible. Not in the realm of not going to happen. It is certainly possible. But as I mentioned, step by step, cautious, develop trust, feel the need. What exactly is it that they want to talk about? It will be done. It will be done. It will happen gradually. It won't happen. I mean, the floodgates are not going to open of the relationship, but it will be a cautious approach, and step by step, I think a lot will be able to be achieved.
Right. I think the biggest takeaway from this conversation for anybody watching in India is that New Delhi is not doing this for the love of Taliban. They're doing it to protect their own national interests. Plus, the human rights situation in Afghanistan is not forgotten, but engagement is a way to actually raise those issues and perhaps in the future put pressure on the Taliban to improve. Thank you so much, Mr. Tilak Devasher, for speaking to us on Firstpost.
Thank you so much.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is Firstpost Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.